All right.
So getting into that, let's hear about who already did punch their ticket to the All-American.
In the BFL Weekly Update.
Sorry, that was a crappy segue. My bad.
That's okay, Joe.
You saved it. You saved the segment, though.
That's all right. We're going to make this thing work. I guess, first off, we'll talk about the St. Johns River. Robert Krosno. I hope I said his name right.
Yeah, I would say Krosno.
He caught 47 pounds, 6 ounces. He had only 14 bass, didn't catch a limit on day 2, did have a pretty good fish in his day 2 bag. And I'm going to let him talk about his strategy and his win and all that jazz right now.
Basically, my decision was made easy because from Palatka, I lived like 3 hours from Palatka. But from the Astor boat ramp, which is 55 miles on the river-wise, south of Astor, was only an hour and 15 minutes from my house. And the St. Johns River, basically, is I don't ever fish the St. Johns River. Like, only during the spawn. I've only been there about 5 times in my life, and that was always during January, during the spawn, and you go to Lake George to look at them. And so it was basically a strange place to me. So I put it at Astor every single day of my practice, which I spent about 5 days, 5 days practicing before cutoff. And just every day I was off, I'd go down there and practice. And I really wasn't on much. I was on casting fish in a lake called Woodruff, Lake Woodruff, which is off the St. Johns River. You know, it's like an off lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on pretty good casting fish then. But believe it or not, Wednesday, before the tournament started, I went and fished an area that I had been practicing 3 different times on because it looked so good. And it had been sprayed. And for whatever reason, after the county or the state had sprayed the hyacinths in this lake, which was Lake Dexter, the fish showed up. And that's basically, my decision was easy. It's the only place I practiced, and that's where I had to go fish. And it was kind of painstaking because the river flooded the day before the Wednesday before we start the tournament. The river had went to flood stage, so the state emergency management decided to make like a 4-mile stretch of river, a 3-mile stretch of river, an idle zone. And it took us 47 minutes to idle one way. Yeah, that's after a 55-mile run. So it was an hour and a half it took us to get one way every day of the tournament. But that's the only place I had practiced, so we had no choice. And once I got to Lake Dexter, it was basically all just flipping, punching real heavy mats with an 1.5 ounce weight. And day 1 was good. You know, I caught a 7-pounder the first 3 minutes of the tournament. And, you know, I filled a pretty good limit that day of 18 pounds, 12 ounces. Day 2 in the same exact area, you know, I only get 5 bites all day long. So I was really disappointed. But I did lose a big fish that day. I lost like, you know, a 7 or 8 pounder that day. And so, I mean, I would have at least held with the field on the second day, but, you know, losing that big fish was the cost big. So I weighed in 5 pounds, 12 ounces. And the third day, you know, the cut day, I had no choice but to go back there. And the first 30 minutes of fishing, I caught a 9-pound, 4-ouncer, a 4.5, and a 3-pounder in the first 30 minutes of fishing. So in my mind, I said I already made the All-American, and I just fish relaxed all day. And I actually went and fished some new water and made it as a practice day. And I found one stretch from at 12 o'clock, and I caught another 3-pounder and I lost another like 7 or 8 pounder. And I told my co-anchor that day, I said, well, when I lost that fish at 1 o'clock, there was a guy brim fishing, an old black man brim fishing. And I asked him, I said, sir, do you think it'll, so do you mind if I go between you and the grass line? He goes, no, go ahead. And we was talking, and I got right, he was brim fishing. He was catching brim one after another. And I said, man, that's a good sign. Probably some giants around here. Sure enough, I get like 20 feet from this man that was brim fishing and flip in there, and I literally lose a 9-pounder, 8 or 9 pounder right in front of him again. I looked at my toy and I said, I just lost the tournament right there.
But as it happened, he didn't lose it. He had enough to win. And the baits he was using all week, he was basically using one bait. He was throwing a hematoma-colored kinky beaver. It's a sweet beaver, but it's got little squirrely tails on it instead of just the standard flippers. And he was flipping that on, an ounce and an ounce and a half weight. And that was the deal.
But he was the guy that only had one rod on his deck too, right?
Yeah, he said on the third day when he took off, he only put one rod on the deck, which is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
You would think he might have a spare.
Pretty dialed in.
Yeah, he was pretty dialed in, but he was also pretty committed. I mean, he knew that from the way he'd practiced and what he had lined up and the possibilities for finding more fish and all that stuff, he knew he had one option. And it turned out to be that he was able to sort of find some other stuff as the time went on, but it worked out for him very well.
Cool. Congratulations to Robert Krosno. Punched his ticket to the All-American.
Awesome. We're saying punched his ticket a lot. We may want to.
All right.
We may want to slow down on people punching their tickets.
Fair enough.
I'm not sure what we'll say instead, but it's something, a possibility.
He is qualified for the All-American.
Yes, he is. All right. And next up, the James River event, Chris Daves caught 33 pounds, 0 ounces. He caught 15 fish, so he had his limit every day. And I figure we'll let him talk about how he did that right now.
I would start up the James because the tide was lower up there in the mornings, and then run down to the Chick about lunchtime, and I caught, probably 50% of my fish up the James and 50% in the Chick. Square bill crankbaits on wood, and I caught a couple key fish on buzzbait. But targets in grass and wood. It was coming in the morning, but it was closer to the low tide than say if you'd have went. The further you went down the river, the higher the water was getting. And then the water would turn around and start out, way down the river, like in the Chick. So I was trying to fish like the first 2 or 3 hours of incoming up the James while it was still lower and hadn't got all the way high yet. And then I'd try and run down there to catch the high tide going out.
All right. So I guess the only 2 things to add to that sort of are that when he was fishing his stuff in the James River, he was fishing an area. It's called, I don't know for sure if it's called either the Pits or the Bends, but they're kind of similar, close together. It's where the river does a lot of looping around, and there's some old sort of dugout barge pits. And he said the main reason that was important and why that was good was because that's where a lot of bait goes, shad and stuff like that. And that's where a lot of bait congregates in the fall and why his fish replenished. And then obviously you heard how masterfully he was playing the tide and how perfectly that worked out for him. So that's obviously a thing where you don't really expect that to happen ahead of time, but then sometimes it happens and it works out great.
I'm trying to think of something cool to say other than punched his ticket. Off the top of my head, nothing's coming to me though. Congratulations, Chris Daves. We'll see you at the All-American.
I think that worked out really well. I think you did a great job on that, Joe.
All right.
And that has been the BFL Weekly Update. For more like this, check out the rest of the FLW podcast at flwoutdoors.com or on iTunes.